All right, well, we're going to pick up here where we left off on the last film clip and take a look at some blue ocean companies and how they got started, and also look at how we would go about an analysis to determine an effective blue ocean strategy, keeping one particular company in mind. Now, some of the companies that you may be familiar with that have used a blue ocean strategy are Starbucks, Walmart, Southwest, and then one we're going to analyze in detail called Yellowtail, a wine from Australia. Now, what I'd like to have you do here is to think about some ways where um, each of these companies have employed the four action framework. And remember what that four action framework is. What you do is attempt to strategically reduce costs by either reducing or eliminating factors that are not important to the customer. And also to strategically increase value by raising expectations or creating new value added features for the customer. Now with Starbucks, if I look at reducing, of course, Starbucks has a more expensive coffee than I could get at a typical coffee shop or from a Bunomatic at a gas station. But at the same time, while they might not be doing much in terms of reducing costs, and that does not necessarily mean reducing price for the customer, it means reducing costs of doing operations. But on the area of value creation, Starbucks has moved beyond coffee into creating an experience. Walmart, of course, is one that is continually trying to reduce costs and eliminate things that are not necessary to continue to do what they always have done, low prices every day. Southwest, we've spent quite a bit of time talking about already, but you can think of some ways in which they have both reduced their cost and increased their value. And the increasing value, a lot of that is the frequent flights, on-time arrivals, inexpensive fares. Now, Yellowtail, you probably don't know much about yet, but you will as we go through the following slides. Now, one of the key tools in the Blue Ocean strategy bag of tricks is a thing called a strategy canvas. And what this is to try and graphically illustrate what the competitive situation looks like with one or more competitors. And this is something that's always done from the perspective of the observer. It has nothing to do that you can get out of a textbook or out of an analysis that someone else does. But what it attempts to do is to pick a series of factors that you can see along the bottom line. And these will be areas where you perceive as the observer, where value could be increased or value created for the customer, or where there are customers being overserved, where costs could be reduced. On the vertical, the plot is how important each of those factors is in terms of what the customer expects for value. So we're going to look at this in a little bit more detail and see if we can give you a better understanding of the concept. So as I said, this is something that is personal because each industry is unique. And companies in an industry tend to share similar business models, which means that we can plot how each of them addresses the marketplace. And of course, this is part of that word convergence that we've used in the past, where we find that people not only take similar approaches in their business models, but they have a tendency, unless they fight against it, to become more and more alike so that they move toward pure price competition, which we do not want to be involved in. Each person examining an industry is going to see it through their own point of view. And that's one of the things that gives this technique of laying out a strategy canvas power, because it forces you to put down what you're thinking about positioning of competitive products and your own product in the marketplace. So because this is something that's unique to the individual, the observer, we're going to see that we draw different conclusions. And the tool to allow you to examine this is the strategy canvas that you saw, and we'll go back to it in a second. You select the characteristics that you believe are important in the eyes of the consumer. And you set the weighting for these as to the value of each in the customer's mind. And what you have to do is you got to go out and you got to do market research. So this is independently of drawing the strategy canvas. You just want to have a whole lot of information to be able to plot on that canvas. So as I said before with the strategy canvas, along the horizontal axis, what you'll do is to list the factors you believe to be important. And on the vertical, the relative importance in the customer's eyes. Now, you can see on this chart that one company has the blue, is represented in blue. And what the observer has done is to plot for each of those important factors how significant this is in the particular vendor or particular competitors' marketing strategy and their application of their strategy to their customers. So you'll notice that in factor number 1, factor number 2, and factor number 3, which in an actual analysis, of course, would have a title or a name. Those seem to be very important in the mind of the product offerer. However, factors 6, 7, or factors 7 and 8 are relatively unimportant in that customer's mind. By contrast, the red line listed as competitor number 1 sees many of those factors as relatively of little importance, hence the way it's plotted on the graph with low values in the vertical area. But item factor number 7 and number 8 are viewed by that competitor as being very important. So as we look at different competitors, and typically what you'll do is, if you wanted to do this analysis, is probably pick 3 competitors, because you'll get a feel for the whole industry looking at just, say, the biggest guy, the most expensive guy, and the cheapest guy. If you plot those, you're going to get a pretty good idea of where the industry stands. And this will give you what you need as a way to plot your own graphic line on that chart. And so the way you're going to do this is to use that ERRC grid. And what you may recall from the prior film clip, what you're looking to do is in the cost area, either eliminate factors that are unimportant to the customer or reduce factors that are of less importance than the actual current product offering would suggest. At the same time, look for areas where, well, in the first case, in the cost area, what we're indicating is we believe that the customer is being overserved, and that means they're incurring costs that they don't want to pay for. We have to identify those areas where we think that those costs can be reduced. On the value side, there are certain things that'd be nice for the customer to have, where we could raise the current standard, making the offering more valuable to the customer, or where we could create an entirely new benefit for that customer. So let's go a little bit further with this. We are talking about eliminating and reducing because those are the things where the customer is overserved. And we're looking at raising and creating new values where the customer is underserved and would be willing to buy more or pay more or both for those additional advantages. So strategic cost reduction, what does that mean? We want to look at what the industry is spending money on that may have been taken for granted, like in the example that we saw in the previous film clip with the items that have over time been removed from automobiles. that these are things that no longer enhance the value and actually may detract from the value in the customer's mind, particularly when they have to pay for something that they really don't like. Um, these could be things that the management, because they have not done a rigorous analysis, have not recognized as something that no longer benefits their customers. They're not doing the process of what Peter Drucker says to do, and that is abandon products when they no longer create value. Well, what features have been over-designed, and how does this increase, and how did this increase cost with no payback? We're looking for that as well. This example here is the world's largest Swiss Army knife with 87 specific items in the base of the knife, and 141 functions that can be performed with it. It weighs 7 pounds and costs about $1,300, and it's only made on special order. But this is something that was over-designed where there really is no payback, and it's more of a thing to examine or to look at than something to actually use. Well, where can we increase value? Frequently, customers have had to compromise and accept something that doesn't really work the way they would like to see it work. And what they have to do is they have to introduce on their own workarounds to make up for the benefits that are not in the products that are currently available on the market. So wherever those workarounds exist, this represents an opportunity to increase value for the customer and, of course, win their loyalty. What new sources of value for buyers can help create new demand and shift strategic pricing for the industry? And I have a note here that says this could be a big deal. And I was thinking about this and thinking about Xerox. Of course, they're the king of the photocopier makers. But of course, they've gone through hard times in the last few years. But back when they first started, back in the 1960s, nobody had any need for photocopying at all. Very seldom would you find a need for more than 1 or 2 copies, and there were various kinds of ways that you could use carbon paper, for example, when you were doing typing, to type 2 or 3 copies at once. And Xerox attempted to sell their product, which was expensive, where they would charge by the copy. And they'd put the equipment in on a monthly charge and then charge per copy. There wasn't much interest in that. But when they shifted to the idea of giving when I say no interest, people would only make 1 or 2 copies of any document that they had. But what they did was to shift the model and put the unit in on a lease basis and offer 2,000 copies a month as part of the base rental. And once they'd done that, just that minor change changed the value in the customer's mind, and people started making photocopies by the tens, the thousands, just as you probably do, and I know I do in my own printer and photocopier. I make far more than I truly need because it just becomes so convenient to do so. And so this was an area where value was created by changing the way in which the customer was served. Now, we said that most industries, members of an industry, use the same kind of an approach to their marketplace. And what we want to do is create a different approach and get an entirely different strategic position with our product. And in this process, what we want to do, and this is one of the key issues, we want to expand the market boundaries. You may remember when we talked early about how industries get organized. What they tend to do is to look at the size of the industry as being finite and that the strategic positioning is all to see how big the slice of the pie, a fixed size pie, your company or any other competitor can gain control over through their direct head-to-head marketing approaches. What we want to do is to think in Blue Ocean strategy is to think about expanding those market barriers or market boundaries and look at a much larger potential audience that we will reach with a different approach to the product offering. So let's now take this down to specifics. And what we're going to do is to look at a highly competitive industry, which is the American wine industry, and look at a new company that wanted to come into that market and see what was available. So they did an analysis, and this is how they did their analysis. They looked at what the industry offers, and they found that most of the wines are sold in package stores or in specifically liquor stores or places where alcoholic beverages would be bought. And there tended to be a binary market. A large portion of the sales were done with premium wines where there was a lot of sophistication and people really had to be sharp shoppers to find what was the appropriate wine for their particular need. And they didn't get much help on it. They had to bring in their knowledge from outside because the clerk was not going to be able to look at the hundreds of different potential offerings and give true guidance to the shopper. On the other hand, there was the budget wine, the jug wines, where this was an inexpensive way to have a wine beverage, and there was not really as much sophistication. There was not much sophistication at all in the kind of product that was offered. And what was going on is that you had these polarized strategic groups, and there were all kinds of titanic battles going on between the premium and budget wines, and there was such a high amount of choice that it made it very difficult for customers to be satisfied. The industry, and this is where the Australian wine company did their research. They found that the American wine industry was the third largest in the world, which is about a $20 billion market. The California wines make up 66% of the sales in the US. And the rest comes from a variety of different foreign countries, including Australia. There was an exploding number of new wines, and some of the new vineyards were in unusual places. Oregon and Washington, for example, have entered into the winemaking area. New York, upstate New York, around the Great Lakes, Ohio as well, have become wine areas for particular kinds of grapes and particular kinds of wines. In California, there is, of course, a secondary market. Initially, everything was done up in Napa, but now there's a separate wine area around Temecula, and also a third area up near Paso Robles. So there is a large amount of variety available. But the problem is that the customer base was stagnant. There aren't new people coming into the market to drink wine. And so while this is the third largest market in the world, it was 31st in terms of per capita consumption. So other factors that the Australian company found were that the top 8 producers owned about 75% of the market, and there were 1,600 other vineyards or under other companies offering the remaining 25% of the industry. And there were a huge amount of money spent on marketing for trying to distinguish one wine from another. A lot of this was done, when we say excuse me, a lot of this was done in what they call top of the line marketing, which would be displays, advertising, the use of special bottles. Every wine would have a slightly different shaped bottle. And because there was so much variety and so much money spent in marketing, there were real severe price pressures. What the Australian company recognized it was the dominant growth strategy was premium wines with more complexity, better image, more prestigious vineyards, and based on the number of medals that were won in wine festivals. So given this information, the Yellowtail people plotted what the premium wine market looked like and looked at through their eyes based on their research. And they saw as the predominant factors, 6 factors. Obviously, factor number 7, price is always significant in people's buying estimates. And what they saw for premium wine buyers, it was important what oenological terms were used and what distinctions were created in their wine communication. The second factor was above the line marketing. And as I said, this is packaging, it's a presentation in the stores. Number 3 as a factor was age and quality. Number 4, vineyard prestige and legacy. And, we burned out 2 or 3 of the wineries this fall fire season up in Napa, but there are a number that are highly recognized names up in that part of the country. Number 5 was wine complexity. How difficult or easy was it to distinguish the difference in flavors from different wines? And then finally, number 6 was the range, the number of different offerings that you had. And as you see this plotted from the eyes of the Australian Wine Company, they perceived that each of those factors, where the green dots are, was important in the customer's making its decision as the winemakers perceived their marketplace. Now, on the vertical, of course, well, you can see if you turn your head, you can see that what they were measuring on the vertical axis was the offering level versus wine drinkers' expectation, what they were offering and what the customers really expected. So let's see how this played out. And we're going to keep price in mind on the far end there because that is important. So they saw all of these as important factors. Now, they also looked at the budget wines. And here, same factors were used, but the curve is going to be different. The oenological terms were still important. Above the line marketing, not so important. Aging quality, not so important. Thursday is a very good day. The vineyard prestige is not that significant. The wine complexity, you got red and white. And the wine range is very narrow when you're dealing with something in the jug wines. And price was significantly less than the premium wine, so that the curve looks something like this. So given these facts, what the Australian company wanted to do was to find out what they could do to get their product introduced into the US if they chose to go in that direction once they'd completed their analysis. So they went out and surveyed people. And what people said is it's too confusing and complex to buy wine. And the wine descriptions and terminology are hard to understand if you're not already in the business of drinking wine. The shopping experience was frustrating because the clerk really couldn't help you. And you were flooded with all kinds of information that was difficult to evaluate. and there was really no way to get clear guidance on what to buy and drink. Now, this was my experience when I first went to Starbucks, because I didn't want to go in any more than a wine buyer wants to go into the store and give an order for something that's going to look like it's stupid. And also, when you bought the wine, you don't want to take it home and find that your guests think you were stupid as well. Most people would end up just saying, well, I want a red or a white. I don't want to look foolish by serving a red wine with fish or a white wine with meat. And that was very much the way I felt about going into a Starbucks before I began buying coffee there. And so I actually walked back and forth in front of the store 2 or 3 times because I didn't want to look stupid ordering a caramel macchiato latte with a non-fat, whatever they put into it that's non-fat, and 2 shots because I might just look like a fool, and I was too sophisticated to want to look that way. So I finally screwed up the courage to go in and order a plain black coffee, and that's what I've been drinking ever since. But that's probably the way wine drinkers are, or they do what I essentially was doing until I made the plunge, and that's not drink wine or not drink coffee. So the whole purchasing experience was very intimidating for non-customers or non-consumers. And this was the majority of the US population. They just didn't want to, it was much easier to buy a good beer or to use soft drinks or liquor instead of mixed drinks, rather than to get yourself caught in an embarrassing position. So Yellowtail drew their value curve on their strategy canvas. And so this is you may remember, this is the area that we looked at before for the premium wines and the budget wines. But the Australian company, who we'll now name, is called Yellowtail, added 3 other factors that their analysis said were important to potential wine drinkers. These are the non-consumers that they wanted to convert into their product. One of them was easy drinking, that they didn't want to have a high level of angst about people making a decision or judging them on what it was that they were serving. They wanted ease of selection so that they didn't have to go through all of this mental computation to figure out which of the premium wines to select. And they wanted to see how people could use this for fun and adventure in easy drinking without having to have the sophistication of embarrassment with the high price or with being judged for serving the low priced wines. And then, of course, they were going to look at the price as well. So how did they draw their strategy canvas? Again, from their perspective as the observer. Well, they saw all of these major things that were important, very important to premium wine drinkers, and of significant importance to the jug wine drinkers as really being of far less importance than you would think. And what they put a high value on in terms of their marketing appeal was the easy drinking, ease of selection, fun and adventure, and they priced a product in between the premium price wines and the budget wines. So this is the secret of a good wine. And in the next video, you'll get a chance to see how Yellowtail implemented this strategy and what the results are.